This is Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight, I've got Rocco Million joining me. Rocco is a former Real Progressive, but he's always a Real Progressive at heart. And Rocco and I are talking about doing some stuff in the future because we're just flat out fed up with people not paying attention. I mean, we're straight up about as fed up as you can get with people just not paying attention. There's so much going on. The Amazon is on fire. We've got people out there that are acting like the Green New Deal isn't something worth fighting for. And then we've got people that don't understand the difference between a job guarantee and a UBI and what the whole deal is with it. So what I've done is I've decided that I would bring my buddy Rocco on here. And Rocco Million, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, how's everyone doing? Hi, Real Progressives. What's up, everybody? Welcome. Glad to be here, Steve. Anxious to get started and back into the flow.
Absolutely. Well, Rocco, I've got you on solo, brother. Tell me exactly what it is that you see happening right now with the progressive movement. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I can only handle so many things at one time. My brain can only handle so many things at one time. And when I see people trying to distract me with this and distract me with that, I realize how incredibly uphill this battle is for us. I mean, you can't even have a straight conversation about the things to solve these problems. They just want to show. It's like my kids, man. Daddy, look, there's poop on the floor. There's poop on the floor. And it's like, hey, guys, there's a toilet. Let's look at the toilet. Let's figure out how to use a toilet. But nobody wants to figure out how to use the toilet. They like playing in shit. And so, for me, I'm interested because you and I, even though we come from the same place in some ways, you got a different strategy, man. And what do you see with these folks, man?
Well, what I see is mostly, I was guilty of the same thing. We all come from the same place. Nobody just wakes up and knows everything. You have to grow and learn and constantly question your previously held positions and beliefs, and make sure that your ideology reflects reality and put reality over your ideology when it doesn't. So what I do and what we do is destroy the mainstream lies and scare tactics that are used to keep people divided and to keep us opposing public spending, because that's what it comes down to. In the end, when it all boils down and to the end, it's about government doing its job. People don't even know what that job is. They don't even know what's on the Constitution. They'll call me a communist. They'll say, "Oh, you guys just want free stuff. Go get a job." Then I say, "Well, I advocate the federal job guarantee. I advocate true full employment. It's you that are opposing me, and you're telling me to get a job." Free stuff. Is it free stuff when the government hires a military and we all get free protection? Is that evil socialism? So how would it be any different for the government to hire doctors to keep us all healthy? We need healthy populations to be productive and meet our needs of tomorrow so that America can exist in perpetuity, just like we need protected populations to be productive and meet our needs of tomorrow. So that's what I try to point out, using simple logic, things that anybody can grasp. I'm no scholar. I'm a high school dropout. I'm a disabled vet, but I put the work in. I study, through you, Real Progressives, the greats like Dr. Stephanie Kelton, Bill Mitchell, and others. Anybody can understand this stuff and have the knowledge. Weaponize your speech so that you could destroy the mainstream narratives to ultimately unite the public for the public purpose.
I like that, Rocco. So the public purpose, one of the things I think that is to put everything that we want to talk about tonight into a nutshell. It's the fact that people, as soon as they see something, they think that we've got to do direct action at that thing, right? Like your kid, is coloring on the walls. And so everything else going in the world right there has to stop. It's all about coloring on the walls. And the fact is that you've got some more fundamental issues to deal with before you worry about the silly stuff with just crayons on the wall. I mean, when we're talking about public spending and we're talking about MMT and we're talking about understanding how to solve all these problems, people don't complain typically. People are not typically fighting us on these programs and stuff like that because they think that they necessarily don't need them. They're fighting it for us because, number one, they think we can't afford it. And number two, they're fighting it for us because they think it's going to come from their hard-earned tax dollars, right? They're coming from their hard-earned tax dollars. And so they shut down. It's like a shutdown immediately. And in my mind, once you disabuse them of that bullshit, they immediately have a different opinion. The ones that are willing to hear you talk. The ones that aren't willing to hear you talk, the problem with them, and this is where I go probably the wrong way, man. I've been doing this so long, and I'm so sick and tired of people that haven't done the homework, puffing up, acting like they know something. And it's not just about acting like, I get it, man. What I don't get is I am desperate, right? I'm desperate. I'm not an activist just for everybody else. I'm an activist for my own family too. And so when I think about what them ignoring what we're saying and thinking they got it going on, being a snarky laugher and scoffer and all the other nonsense, it's not so much that I'm angry at them for being a doubter or whatever. I mean, just move on down the road if it was no big deal. But it's not just no big deal. It's our lives. And you look at everything that comes with that. And you say to yourself, my God, you're supposed to be on my team. We're supposed to be fighting for the same thing. You said you want health care for everyone. You swear to God you want health care for everyone. You say you want free college. You want to get rid of student debt. I say, I'm with you, homie. And I'm like, here's how you do it. And they scoff. And it's in that moment that I lose my shit. It's not that they're scoffing because I'd walk away. It's that they're putting my family in danger when they do the scoffer's routine. I mean, what do you think, Rocco?
Well, and they don't even realize what they're scoffing at. I'll get so-called woke people, progressives, saying, the first thing we have to do is end our for-profit imperialism. And why doesn't Bernie Sanders oppose for-profit imperialism? And I tell him, are you insane? Bernie, he speaks out against for-profit imperialism all the time and against proxy wars all the time. But more than that, you got to understand the solution. The federal job guarantee ends the military's employer of last resort status. And so that would deal the military industrial complex a much bigger blow than any one vote, would have, and people don't understand that. They don't, they let these mainstream lies and scare tactics, bog them down and make us counterproductive. They have us on the hamster wheel, so when I explain this stuff, a lot of the people, the same trolls I run into, I don't even expect them to get it because I've explained it to them hundreds of times. But other people are being able, every time I have to explain this stuff, that information is out there for public consumption and other people see it. And so the message is still getting out there, and I'm getting better saying it every time I say it. So practice makes perfect. And, and it's good to get out of the bubble. You know what I mean? Everywhere I go, I'm talking about this stuff. Because like you say, this isn't an academic exercise. People are dying. Literally, millions are dying of artificial scarcity. Millions dying of treatable, preventable illness just for a lack of cash. And you want to talk about socialized medicine creating death panels. Those are capitalist death panels right now. They price out millions of people from, essential public services like healthcare, and people don't realize it. Like you said, with the taxes and the healthcare and different things, they think their taxes got to go up. You explain to them how this is it's logically impossible for taxes to fund the federal government because taxpayers can't create dollars. We go to jealous counterfeiters if we try to create dollars to fund the government. But in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution is very clear in making Congress the currency issuer and the only currency issuer. So, it's kind of easy to destroy their arguments when you got the Constitution in black and white and you have simple logic, to do it.
I used to go around, way, way back. I remember the first time I put a camera in front of my face, I was nervous as hell. I was shaking. People that are first-time live streamers, I'm sure, will relate to this. But this is years ago, and I used to be like, guys, here's the story, and here it is. And then over the course of time, the deluge of people literally slam dancing on me, acting like I didn't know what I was talking about. Literally, just every single thing I said, go buy a textbook, crack a spine of an econ book. And, you go through all this stuff and I'm like, dude, I've got 2 fucking master's degrees. We're not talking about a guy that didn't already do this. In fact, I probably lapped these people 40 times. It's not an issue of knowledge. The fact is that MMT and federal spending and understanding how to do these grand things, which Bernie Sanders just put forward, $16.3 trillion in new spending that's got all the scoffers scoffing. They're out there scoffing, pie in the sky in it, just like Hillary did. And you think to yourself, hey, at some point in time, you either really meant it when you said you wanted green energy, you really meant it when you said you wanted to put an end to the military as the employer of last resort. You either meant it or you didn't. It's that simple. We're not playing in shades of gray here. We're playing in, you're either fighting for your life or you got it comfy and you're not worried about it. And for me, I look at it like this. Economics bores the piss out of me overall. It really does. And yet it's the thing I talk about every single day because I don't care about the econ. I care about what the econ enables. It's what it gives us, because economics and money, if you listen to the experts, if you listen to our podcast with Scott Fulweiler on macro and cheese, you heard him say flat out that MMT's goal is not to print more money and make it all about money. The goal of MMT is to make money the least important thing that we're dealing with. The most important thing is the real resources and the programs that we're enabled to put out there. And when I think to myself, all this pain and suffering, people really have capitulated to capital. And I'm talking about the left. I'm not talking about the right. The right loves capital. I'm talking about the so-called left, the center left, and the super left. The folks that are advancing a UBI in particular, they have capitulated in every meaningful way to capitalism. They have said, you know what? Throw us peasants some breadcrumbs and we'll be thrilled. We don't ask for anything more than that. But we're sitting here looking at them and I'm like, folks, a federal job guarantee, but robots are coming, automation. And I'm like, have you ever walked through your own community before? How many things have robots and automation not taken care of? Starting with tending to all the people that are paying $1,600 a month for daycare because they have to go to a shitty job that they can't stand. What if the local community provided health care, daycare, you name it care, and the people were able to choose to work in their communities on a federal job guarantee, paying a living wage with federal benefits, paid for by the federal government with keystrokes, and administered by their local communities. But no, these UBI people are trying to tell me that we're trying to force people to work, and they don't realize that many of the things they think they would do if they were on a UBI are what we're trying to transform. We're trying to change the way people see the idea of work by changing fundamentally, instead of it making it whatever's profitable to capital, making it whatever's profitable in terms of quality of life for the people. And I'll tell you one more thing, and I'll let you speak on this. When I see women, my mother is a prime example, even though my mom and dad loved each other immensely. But my mom had to leave the workforce for 30 years pretty much to take care of us kids. You could have one income back then. But then midway through my high school years, things started tightening down. My dad retired. Mom had to go back to work. And you know what? She didn't have any skills. She had not been employed. Had we had a UBI, she'd be screwed on $12,000 a year. But instead, somehow or another, we were able to get her back into the fold, and she was able to retire with some benefits. In a job guarantee format, my mom wouldn't have had to have worried about that. She would have been able to step right in and take care of whatever she needed to take care of at a living wage, not some freaking slave peasant. Here's some freaking crumbs. What do you think about that, man?
I just got into this again today because this goes into not just robots taking over, but how do we get all these offshore jobs back? And the trade war, Trump's trade war. Okay, we don't need those offshore jobs back. We don't need to worry about the robots taking work because look around. We got so much work right now that's not getting done because it's not profitable. And like you said, the private sector, it only gets in the work when it's profitable. So, the work that isn't profitable, it's not going to get done. So when we have offshore jobs, when we have a trade deficit, that means we're getting cheap imports. And that allows our work to then focus directly on society, raising everybody's living standards with public services like healthcare, education, infrastructure, energy, all the things, childcare, all the things that raise living standards. Same with robots. When robots come in and do the precarious work, that allows our workers to focus directly on society, raising living standards with socially productive work instead of for-profit work. When the private sector's doing the work, it's because it makes a profit. All right, government, it doesn't need profit. It's the currency issuer. Its job is to satisfy the Constitution, and it has a social construct of taxation and spending to provision the Constitution and society. So.
Well, so let me let me just give a quick 2-second MMT overview for those that aren't familiar with this. Modern monetary theory is just a description, folks. This is not something that if we someday implement or some funny money thing or anything like that. MMT is a description of currency and how currency works, period. It describes the gold standard and it describes the free fiat currency, free floating fiat currency that we are in today. And so one of the things that is important is to understand how money exists in society and what its primary purpose is. And in a state-based system where the state has its own monopoly issuance of currency, like the United States or like the UK, or like Australia, or like Japan, and a number of other places, okay? The government issues currency, and they tax only in that currency because that tax is what drives the need to have that currency. And by creating that loop, it's not to pay for things because the government just created that money out of thin air, baby. It is just keystrokes. It is just keystrokes. It is just keystrokes. It is a tally. It's a coupon. It's nothing more than that. The thing that provides the value, if you will, is the fact that the government says we'll take that $1 as $1 in tax credit. You need that $1 to pay your taxes in. All right. Simple stuff so far. The real resources are what backs up our currency. It's not a commodity-based. It's not anything else. There's no petrodollar crap. My God, get rid of Alex Jones, please. Dear God, get him out of here. And ultimately, by understanding this, when you say, how are we going to pay for it? You've just basically said, I don't understand anything. The reality is Congress will authorize spending as it does every year for the military, $750 billion spent on the military with a corresponding huge tax cut, okay? Yep. So if taxes pay for spending, you already proved yourself incorrect there. Immediately, right in that moment, you just said, oh, it's over. Done. Yep. So if you know that taxes don't fund spending, you know Republicans can't stand their taxes going up, you know LOL Libertarians don't like taxes, and you're a Democrat or a progressive or a green, and you continue to run this game saying you're going to pay for programs with taxes, you're shooting yourself in the foot, because you could build wide swaths of support amongst the 99% if you explain to people that we can afford to have nice things. We don't have to suffer at the hands of capital. It's infuriating. It is infuriating, brother.
I try to explain it like, because Article 1, Section 8, it clearly says Congress is mandated to lay the tax and pay the debts to provide for our general welfare and common defense. So that's not opinion. That actually means Congress makes the dollars at will from thin air by law. Okay? Taxation and spending is a social construct. It's a means of production. Dollars are just a law to satisfy tax. Okay, and no one can refute that. A dollar is a tax credit. All right, and so when the government imposes that tax on us, we need dollars to satisfy our tax. So that creates demand for the dollar, or otherwise known as unemployment. So that's the purpose of taxation at the federal level. It's not to fund the government. It's to guarantee demand for the dollar and create unemployment. So government can then provision society as it spends, creating paid employment, provisioning a military and legal systems for our common defense, and, healthcare and education and infrastructure for our general welfare. So government creates the economy. When people say, we don't want government-run healthcare. Without the government, there is no healthcare. There's no economy. There's no market. Government regulates everything. All right, they keep buffer stocks of the most important commodities to make sure the prices don't fluctuate too wildly and make people bankrupt and farmers lose everything, or different people. They keep the markets. Their job is to maintain the market. That's the purpose of the government, to spend dollars creating economy and maintaining the economy and the society in perpetuity.
So, Rocco, with, down in Brazil, we've got Bolsonaro, who has basically set fire to the Amazon in a deforestation attempt, basically saying, hey, man, screw you, I don't care. But, I'm no scientist. But when you look at the rainforest and you realize that it's the lungs of the earth, without having that ability to absorb the carbon, we were already heading to disaster. We're really heading to disaster with this. I would go so far as to say Bolsonaro is actually doing something against the world. I'm not a warmonger here, but I'm saying what he's doing is going to hurt every one of us. And this Green New Deal that Bernie Sanders put forward at $16.3 trillion. He laid it out very, very specifically. He's talking about completely decarbonizing our entire economy by 2050. And he's talking about completely being off of fossil fuels by 2030. He's talking about getting back into the Paris Accord and, more importantly, a federal job guarantee. I mean, his Green New Deal is... we're talking about electric buses even. This man has gone so far as to take all the stuff that we've talked about. And there are a few things in there that are somewhat controversial, because there's new technology on the nuclear side. And I know people hate nukes and they hate nuclear and they hate all these things. But there is some new technology out there that actually eats away and uses the waste so that you don't have all that problem. And I'm not suggesting to go for it. I'm just trying to say there are some counter arguments from really good people that are not third-way Democrats that are trying to make a buck off this. And so I guess my question to you, Rocco, is, in dealing with activists and dealing with the common man, how many people do you think really, truly understand the climate emergency that is upon us? And how many people do you think even have a clue how important a Green New Deal actually is?
I'm not even going to speculate a guess, but nowhere close to the number we need. But it's either one extreme or the other. Because there's a lot of people out there that just say, oh, well, it's too bad. There's nothing we could do. And they throw their hands up and they use it as a cop-out. Oh, there's nothing we could do. We're doomed anyway. We might as well just do what we're doing. And so, but what I tell people is, in reality, that free market that you're always yammering on about, in a true free market, fossil fuels would already be obsolete. We have better tech already available. We have sustainable green tech already. Our government gives huge direct federal subsidies to fossil fuels, and then they suppress better tech with tariffs and taxes and all kind of other stuff to keep fossil fuels competitive. Why on earth would we want to keep fossil fuels competitive? And like you said about the rainforest, I mean, that is something that does affect everybody, and we do have a real need for military. We can't be. We have to be realists. I'm against for-profit war. I'm against needless war. But something that is going to affect the planet's ability to regenerate is that's violence. You know what I mean? That would be violence in my eyes, and so we would be warranted to get into whatever action is necessary to safeguard the world's natural resources.
Absolutely. And you look across, and I say to myself, if we have so many people, okay,
we should be paying them to keep the oil in the ground. I'm sorry.
Oh no, look, man. I look at Florida and I look at Greenland. I mean, Greenland is melting faster. I mean, we're losing our ice so much faster than we ever dreamed possible. And is the planet going to be here? The planet will be here. It's just a question of whether we'll be here. And if we are here, which, I don't want to be an alarmist in that sense, because we don't know. And I'm not going to sit there and paint the black. What's that?
We'll probably be here, but life as we know it will be changed. And life is going to be a lot worse for everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, but you think about this. I mean, I look at things like Syria, and I look at things like Central America and South America, and I see climate emergency bringing us climate refugees. People don't realize it, but that's what we're seeing. Especially in the Middle East, you see a lot of climate-related refugees. These people are fighting over real resources, access to real resources, and they're also being puppeted by neoliberal globalists who are in there bankrolling these things to create these scenarios where they can come in and be heroes with capital to save the day, to fix the mess that they created. So I guess Rocco, when I look at the progressive movement, right? And I'm going back to the beginning of Bernie, because I think of the world in terms of AB and BB, after Bernie and before Bernie, etc. Because everything changed with Bernie Sanders. People can act like, oh well, so and so was saying that back in 2019. Shut up. Just shut up. You're a green person, or you're this person, or you're that person that said something, didn't have a platform. Bernie Sanders is the one that made the change, period. I don't care. There's a lot of people whose shoulders he had to climb on in some senses to get that knowledge, but Bernie Sanders is the one who's taking it. He's the one that made the public change. He's the one that had the foresight to bring in Stephanie Kelton so that he could have an economic team to make it happen. So when I look at this, I think of the world changing literally at that point in time. And so as we look forward and we look at what we call the Overton window in terms of what is possible and what is not possible, I'm looking at people worrying sick about immigration. You've got white poor people who think that immigrants are taking their jobs, who think that the immigrants are eating their lunch, who think the immigrants are taking their wives. And they think all these horrible things because the scarcity, the fake scarcity this nation has put on us has made everybody dog eat dog. And so these poor folks are coming out of climate crisis. They're coming out of all these hostile situations. And we could solve this so easily with a Green New Deal. You put that federal job guarantee in place, and now everybody is mobilizing to satisfy the climate disaster. Now all of a sudden, I mean, it's amazing what we could do, but they won't do it. Why is that? Because they don't understand.
You turn a negative into a positive. We could, at least up until our operational capacity. But the whole deal is, when you're talking about these climate refugees, but I say not just climate, but isn't it something all these places where climate is causing the problems are also the places that we're involved in illegal right-wing proxy wars? Syria, Central America, all these different places. So there's a number of factors. When you're talking about it, our southern border, El Salvador, and Central America, and all them different nations, we destroyed those nations in the 80s. Okay, with things like Iran Contra and different things. Okay, so we installed vassal kings, basically narco traffickers, narco monopolists. These are right wingers. That's who we proxy with. And so we install these right wing monopolists, and then years later now, the people are suffering. They have no opportunity. They're suffering persecution in every different form because it's basically a police state. I mean, a narco state. So we created the problem. They come to our borders, and now we want to victimize these people even more and throw them in cages and do all these different things when it's not illegal to seek refugee status. Okay, we're actually breaking the law according to international law when we, treat these refugee seekers as illegal aliens. They're doing nothing illegal. If we don't want to deal with our refugee victims, we need to quit going into all these different countries and overthrowing democratic governments to, put our own vassal right-wing puppet governments in.
I couldn't agree more, Rocco. So let's talk real quick about something I think we both have a stake in the game for. Legal marijuana, not just, legalizing it in terms of for smoking, but going into hemp and legalizing the growing of hemp for a whole host of reasons, starting with the environment in terms of its ability to be a filter for the carbon in our air, but also for so many other things that just creates an incredibly excellent biodegradable alternative to many of these DuPont-like plastics and other things that are out there that are filling our ocean up and killing our, the fish off and sea life and so forth. I think right now one of the big deals, you're seeing some populism growing there, but what are you seeing? You're seeing capitalists taking over the production of marijuana. The same assholes that put people in jail are now suddenly profiting off of the very thing that they canned everybody. I mean, especially minorities and African Americans have been tremendously impacted by this. We're looking at all the environmental options here, and hemp has got to be on the table for fuel, for any number of things. What is your experience in terms of the, not just economic justice, but social justice in terms of the drug war and the impact it's had on making people hate each other and attack each other and creating that little friction, if you will, that prevents us from being able to look out for each other's best interest? I think this is a big deal, man.
Well, I got a personal anecdote from here in Newcastle, okay? Because this is a perfect story about how these corporations, it's at every level of government. Our government is not working for the citizens, they're working for the corporate profits. So in Newcastle, we are considered a distressed city, economically distressed. So we were picked, I'm in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, we were picked to grow the medical marijuana for the rest of the state of Pennsylvania. Well, Newcastle, in its infinite wisdom, lets, a single corporation come in and take all those windfall profits on the promise of creating 50 low-wage jobs. Years later, nothing's changed in Newcastle. I said, why on earth wouldn't we have fought to make a public municipal grow that could have supplied the medical weed for the rest of the state? Then that would have created millions of dollars of direct revenue for the city of Newcastle, which would have supported hundreds of living wage public works jobs that would have raised people's standard of living, because that's how you get businesses to come to your city. It's not by cutting taxes. Their corporate profits are already at record highs. They don't need more money. They ain't going to come here because no one in Newcastle has money to buy their products. And they want good schools and good public services, good roads. So this is how you attract good business, not cutting taxes necessarily. It's investing in your society. It's working for your people. But like I said, I guarantee the officials in my town all got kickbacks, and but they told me when I asked the district attorney about it in my interview, he said, "Oh, well, it's against the law. We wouldn't be allowed to do that." And I said, "Well, Philadelphia is opening a legal injection clinic. That's against the law, federal and state, and they're still doing it. You're telling me Newcastle couldn't even try to have a public weed grow?" I mean, come on, we could have at least tried. But anyway,
Exactly.
weed, yeah, like you said, it's a huge thing because it touches on so many issues, from social justice, from the drug war standpoint, to then environmental justice and stuff, with it being a more sustainable fuel source. A good point is the first combustible engine was built with hemp oil. People don't realize that. It was actually designed with hemp oil. America had a law once upon a time. You had to grow hemp in America, because it was that important to our economy. And then, there was a time where, these three moguls, William Randolph Hearst and DuPont and, some Anslinger from the Justice, they got together, these three oligarchs, basically. They got together and they started what we know as the drug war, a propaganda campaign. They wanted to make people associate drugs with minorities and foreigners and things. So, they would, they would marijuana. They made the word marijuana so that people would think of lazy Mexicans taking siestas. There would be stories in the paper about cops needing a bigger caliber gun because coke crazed Negroes wouldn't go down with, five emptying a whole gun on them, literally. And then these stories, they would say that the black people were coming for the white women,
Oh,
all
yes.
stuff. And then white people, because then white people would overlook the systemic abuse of drug law, because there was a time where government would have never dared to tell people what they could put in their body and what they can't. The only way that they were able to take that right away from us is by making people feel like this had nothing to do with them. The drug war only deals with the fringes of society, the bad element of society, not us. And then, but now, as we clearly see, the drug war affects everybody, white or black, rich or poor, really. But poor people and black people the most. But but yeah, marijuana and legal marijuana, there's promise. But like you were saying, and another good point is, why is there so many arrests? You look at the states that now have legal medical marijuana. Why is there the same amount of arrests roughly as there was when it was illegal in that state? It's almost like, they they don't legalize it. They just they decriminalize it. So basically, it's up to the discretion of the cops. And so the cops are still using these laws on certain people, the same certain people, unfortunately.
It's funny you say that. I want to touch on something that I think most people don't realize, and you can tell that they don't realize this by watching Californians and others running around thinking suddenly they can implement Medicare for all within their state, as opposed to understanding the relationship between states and the federal government in terms of currency issuer versus currency user. And for those of you who don't understand that, the federal government is the only one allowed to spend the money into existence. The states have to rely on taxes. They have to rely on bonds. They have to rely on business. They have to have a race to the bottom and cut spending so they can lure business in there. All these games that they play because the federal government has tightened the screws, cut off the spigot of spending, and what you have is states that are doing a race to the bottom. So a lot of the problems you have to understand come as a direct result of the federal government not spending money into the economy. Okay? This whole idea of we got to reduce spending, we got to reduce deficits, we got to pay down the debt. What debt? I mean, the idea here is, and this is what I want people to take away from this. The idea here is that all these problems that we're talking about, so many of them, come as a direct result from a money famine. I'm taking that term from a guy named Steve Larchuk. He dubbed it the money famine. And the money famine is not a UBI famine. It's a federally funded famine. It's a famine that the government has created this idea that we're all broke, that we got to tighten the screws, and that somehow or another businesses create jobs. Well, businesses can't create jobs if there's no money in the economy. And the money doesn't come from but two places. One, the federal government, and two, the federal government, by allowing banks to lend money into existence. So you got two things, one person, one entity that is capable of saying do that. Okay, so what do progressives do these days? Progressives think, I know what we can do. We can create public banks. But what they don't realize is that that money still has to come from the federal government. They completely grok fail the entire system by trying to short circuit it because, hey, I got a really neat idea. Let's do public banking. Now, there's nothing wrong with public banking if you understand what you're using it for as an augment to making available loans to people within your community to try and do things like that. That's a very, very valid use of quote-unquote public banking. But let me state for the record, and you'll hear Warren Mosler say this many, many times. For those of you who don't know Warren is the father of modern monetary theory. But Warren will tell you straight up that banks are all public purpose banks. Banks are all public banks. The problem is, our Congress has failed us again by deregulating the banks and has allowed them to go amok. So the real answer here isn't to create another set of banks, in my opinion. The real answer is to make banking boring again, eliminate the bank's ability to play, casino gambling, and literally shut it down. And Warren's got a great banking proposal that basically says this is what you'll do, and that's all you'll do. Period. And there's none of that funny business. All right. We shut it down. But the problem is, once again, I'm saying this so people understand the relationship between states and the federal government and the role that banks play and how public banks solve a problem that could be solved already by simply nationalizing the banks through regulation, by making them not behave in this way, which is 100%. If we have the ability to make public banks, we certainly have the ability to make the banks that we have today public banks again by writing a freaking bill. But we don't have the will for that because Congress won't do its job. And it always comes back to Congress. You always see this. Not the Rothschilds, not the big banks, not the banksters that you hear so much about. It's the government that is literally not regulating not prosecuting the bankers that do go awry, not prosecuting the business leaders that do screw up. The too big to fail has got to end. So I look at this and I say, when people talk about a Green New Deal and they look at the forest, burning in California, we've got friends on our team that lost homes like Robert Marsh and others from these fires. And so if we don't take the steps to fix this, it's going to fix itself and it isn't going to be good. And all these workarounds like this UBI, hey, we need money, so here, give us $1,000, and hey, we'll do this. All these bullshit workarounds are all they're bowing down. They're like bowing down to capital. Every one of them is a bow down to neoliberalism. Every one of them is a bow down to saying, hey, just leave us some breadcrumbs, dude, okay? And I'm like, I ain't about breadcrumbs, man. I want to survive. I want to thrive. I want my kids to have a future. I mean, talk to me about your view of this.
They're counterproductive. They're counterproductive. They don't understand. Well, we'll go back to the bank thing. Fiscal policy versus monetary policy. They say, end the Fed, end the Fed. And I say, well, if you don't understand MMT, then you're going to be counterproductive to ending the Fed. Because, if you want to end the Fed, if you hate the Fed and you hate private credit, then you need your Congress to balance the economy with deficit spending dollars, up front. So what I say is, Right now we have, like you were saying, a cash famine. Government is starving us of dollars as it targets unemployment. People will say, but right now Trump is deficit spending big time. You should love Trump. And I say, yeah, but he's still starving our economy of public investment. He's spending 83% of that budget to the very top. So he's starving our economy of dollars as he's targeting unemployment and cutting and privatizing essential public goods. This creates that greater worker instability and starvation wages, which makes us dependent on predatory lending and private credit. So the people that are saying that they want to, public banks and end the Fed, they're not understanding that, we could end the Fed today and have Treasury do the exact same thing as the Fed. But it's Congress that's causing the problem by starving our economy of dollars, which forces us into private credit. So if you don't understand the difference between monetary policy, which is private credit in the domain of the Fed, and fiscal policy, which is spending dollars in the domain of Congress, then you're going to be counterproductive in your effort to stop the Fed. And it's like that with every issue you talk about. The national debt. I tell people, look, it's real simple. But I'm not going to explain all that right now. But, all of these things, we have the answers to all of this stuff, and we use simple logic. But I guess it's just we got to be like broken records, and you got to just keep saying the stuff, keep doing the work, because people have to understand that money is just a social construct. Dollars are a law to satisfy a tax. Government uses these laws to organize our economy, organize labor in a way that we have enough real resources created and available for any dollars in circulation to buy. That's what it's all about. The money is infinite for our government. The only thing that matters is our government has to spend, has to make the required investments into our society, into our productive capacity. Things like education and healthcare and roads, because we need smart and healthy populations to be productive. This all goes into it, together.
So I want to touch on something real quick, because I think, and this is a good thing to close on, I think. We have a lot of age groups out there that have a very different perspective on life. You look at the millennials, and a lot of them have never experienced a lot of things. You look at some of them who went through the global financial crisis. You look at people that were around for Reagan, and worse, now you look back and you see people that are around for World War II and so forth. And each of these folks has a very, very different vantage point of things they lived through, not realizing that it really doesn't matter about their personal experiences. It really matters that this is what the currency issuer does. This is like blocking and tackling in football. It doesn't really matter what they did yesterday or tomorrow. This is blocking and tackling, X's and O's. And one of the things I think that's really important to bring up is that in World War II, John Harvey, who we just interviewed, he's on our most recent podcast for Macro and Cheese, he likes to point to the way we were able to do incredible things, bring full employment to the country. I mean, to the point of excessive almost, where they had to sell bonds to keep the economy from overheating, because all of our men were over there at the war. And women and children were manning the, factories and doing. It was just, we were at completely full employment. Every factory was churning and burning at over 100% capacity. Everything was maxed out to the hilt. And I think that maybe one of the things we're missing, and I take this personally here, is that we attract a certain demographic, because the certain demographic feels the same rage, has the same issues at heart. But we need those old timers, the boomers, to understand. And I think by relating it to World War II, something that they can remember, and showing them that, yes, we can. And then reminding the people that were Kennedy fans that we went to the moon once. There was a time when we did great things. And, you go through D.C. and you look at these incredible marble buildings and you're like, hey, we used to do great things. What happened? And I think that they can relate to the fact that we don't do those great things anymore, not because we can't, but because we've been lied to for so long. And I think that might be a way to get the boomer generation into understanding that, yes, we can do great things. This is not communism. You're not going to have to give away your children over some socialist propaganda. It's none of this stuff. But public spending is not socialism.
Fidel Kaboob says it. I think he says it the best, describing the Great Depression and revenues drying up, savings disappearing. There was no money to be had. We were on the gold standard. How did we have all this spending all of a sudden? It's because our government is supreme. Our government suspended the gold standard. Our government created deposit insurance. They ended fractional reserve lending. We know what happens. This is an opinion. We know when our government invests in society, America's prosperous. We went from the Great Depression to beating the existential threat of Nazi Germany and creating a middle class that was the envy of the whole world, with top-notch public education and healthcare and infrastructure. So we know what this does. When we know how to fix this, we know we need our government to do its job. When government doesn't do its job and it lets spectators and capitalists crash the economy, they will crash it, and the Great Depression will happen. And then it takes the people rising up to force the government to spend on the people again, spend at the bottom, being sustainable, spending into our productive capacity, creating smart, healthy people with opportunity for all, with roads and all kind of stuff. That's the name of the game. It's how do you keep America existing in perpetuity? You let America issue its own currency and use that currency to provision itself. And so they got to keep investing in its productive capacity. You want to keep hiring people. You want to keep investing in education. So you're worried about inflation in, let's say, healthcare. You need your government to invest in more productive capacity as it relates to healthcare. This isn't rocket science. You need to be investing more in education, building more hospitals, investing in R&D for medicines, to deal with the demand for healthcare. That's how you would deal with the inflation. You worried about inflation with energy, the same thing. Start building green, sustainable energy grids. Start increasing your productive capacity as it relates to energy. This isn't mystery, but a lot of people never thought about it. So we just have to, point this stuff out. Just like once upon a time, I was a right winger. I voted for W. But when I heard this stuff, I might not have changed overnight, but when I heard this stuff, it planted that seed, and I couldn't ignore that truth. Even there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube. Once people see the logic, it's over. You can't go back to being a neoliberal. I couldn't go back to thinking, oh, we're at full employment, even though I know 3% unemployment's millions of people unemployed. We're not nowhere close to full employment. I don't care what they say.
Well, let me hit this one more time, because this is in the age bracket thing. We got the boomers with the war, we got the boomers with the Great Depression, we got the boomers with the Apollo missions, etc. But then let's look at the millennials for a minute. I mean, they're carrying more student debt on their backs before they even get laid for the first time. I mean, they're walking out of college with a life of debt right from Jump Street. It's over $1.6 trillion that are burdening people, not currency issuing nations, but people, regular people that now have to make up that money. This is a huge drag, not only on the economy, but on the people's willingness to step out and do great things to be able to mobilize to defeat this climate problem. I mean, people are more likely to commit suicide from student debt that can't be discharged than they are to actually attack the climate.
I have a theory about this, though, because, Steve, we have a gig economy now.
Yep.
We don't have a manufacturing economy. So government knows the majority of jobs are always going to be starvation wage. So, why have a population of super educated and skilled people if the majority of them are going to have to be working at McDonald's anyway? So I really think that's why our government, cut funding to education so much, and allowed education to be for profit, privatized and made for profit, so that it's out of reach of so many people. Because when you're targeting 5% unemployment, it doesn't matter if every single worker has the best job skills and the most education. We would still be forcing millions of people to be unemployed, and then millions more to be working poor in the starvation wage environments that results.
Yep.
So,
this is the problem, and I want to lay it out on every one of these levels, and then we'll close it off with this. Each one of these things, they've created somebody that's to blame and somebody that wins. Each one of these things, there's a divide. This is how they keep us divided. They make us believe somehow or another that by some capitalist being able to make profit off of us going to school with charter schools, make some profit off of us with health care. Oh, it's so good. When in reality, somebody's spending is always somebody else's income. So why wouldn't the federal government be the one spending? That way the income is always going fresh, it's always going new, and it can be targeted where it needs to be spent versus pooled with all the rich people. That's what capitalism does. It creates pools of wealth, and it creates a very, very bad system of distribution, not of money, but of real resources. Ever seen these yachts? These yachts are bigger than a football field. And these guys are sitting there riding around. There's 10 people on the whole boat, not including the staff, of course. But they've got a country on the water that they've been able to purchase. Why? Because some have too much and others have too little. And the reality is that a currency issuing nation can offset that and take away the power of the capitalists by spending directly on the people. And that's what all this is about. Spending directly on the people, empowering the people to lead productive, quality lives. And you look at the boomers, and they remember a golden era. They remember a time when they only paid $500 for their college degree. Some of them were free even. And they sit there and say, hey, I paid my college loan off. Well, hey, we're going to go and carry $120,000 for the same damn degree. And we don't have any jobs out there for us because you all have bought into the idea that we can't do different work, that the only work that we can do is from the capitalists because you think anything else is socialist, which is ridiculous. So each one of these lies, from the marijuana game, which you laid out perfectly, hey, we'll name it marijuana, we'll make it about the Spanish. Then your next one is you sitting there dealing with, climate refugees and the job guarantee and people fighting over who's going to get what job. And I mean, every step along the way, they pit the littles against each other. And then you wonder why we can't get anything done. I want a hell of a lot more than $12,000 a year. And final thought for me, and I'll let you close out. You look at Walmart, and Walmart has subsidized shit wages for just forever, and they've gotten richer and richer and richer. The Walton family is ridiculously rich, but they have used social welfare as a means of offsetting shit wages. Can you imagine what those sons of bitches would do with a UBI? They would literally, it's the most ridiculous, stupid thing. The ultimate idea for the UBI is the death knell. It's the knife into the heart of social safety nets to strip away all government protections and say, here's your UBI, now shut up and eat your peas. And you know what? That is going to create yet again another dog-eat-dog, hate-filled world. This is not a matter of, oh, isn't it great? We're all able to play video games all day. No, this is a matter of people literally being left with freaking starvation money. Now imagine, you got to pay for your health care with your $1,000. You got to pay for your housing. You got to pay for your food. You got to pay for your kids' clothes. You got to pay for all this, and you got $1,000. Really? Is that really? You're going to tell me that's better than the job guarantee? You got to be absolutely without a brain to believe that. That is just cockamamie. That's ridiculous. But that is the exact scenario that the capitalists and the Wall Street and the Silicon Valley bastards like Yang, who have put this garbage out there, Scott Santens, who is a snake oil salesman extraordinaire, these idiots have put this out there, and people go, free money, it's got to be good, right? And they don't realize the cost of free money is more than they're willing to pay. They just don't know it yet. I'll let you end off.
I mean, the UBI to me, it just does nothing to end involuntary unemployment, which is class war, which creates greater worker instability. So I think, the first thing is it's always either two choices. Either use government targets true full employment, or it targets a natural rate of unemployment, and so there's no way of getting around that. And I want to share my personal story to explain, because so many people say, how, government doesn't force no one to be unemployed. Name one person that's involuntarily unemployed, Rocco. And I tell them, I'm involuntarily unemployed. And without even getting too technical, I just tell them like this: if you can't take a job, if all the jobs that you got to take are starvation wage, and you can't make ends meet with that job, then you can't afford to take that job. You got to be on the black market, or take credit, or do something else to survive. But there's no point in taking a job that isn't going to help you survive. So that's a lot of people are involuntary unemployed like that. But me, I'm not even counted as unemployed. I'm a disabled veteran. Okay, but I'm still able to be productive. Okay, I tell the judge I could do just about anything. I just need certain needs met. I need maybe a 15-minute break every hour. I need to be able to call off any day I need to, because it takes me a few days sometimes to recover. I need to have more medical flexibilities and stuff like that. And the judge said, well, there's no private sector employer that can be, that would be okay with, so you're unemployed. And I try to tell people, well, but the government doesn't have to worry about profit. The private sector might not be able to deal with all my needs because they need to make a profit. That would eat into their profits if I could just call off any day and take breaks all the time. But government doesn't have to concern itself with profit. It can max out Rocco's productivity for the good of society, and give me right now, the government, with a federally guaranteed living wage job, I could be behind me at this elderly home, spending a few hours a day with the elderly, helping them live safe. And I'd be raising living standards. I'd be contributing to society. I'd have a purpose, so it would be creating better citizens. But instead, right now, government pays me to not work. So I tell these righties and different people, you're saying go get a job. Right now, you're saying the status quo is pay people to not work. I'm saying we should pay people to work, especially when America is crumbling in need of work. It's just common sense. But that's all.
All right, buddy. Look, it was great having you back on the air, man. It's been a long time, and I just want to say it's really good that you and I were able to find a way to get back together and mend fences. I look forward to seeing you at the MMT conference at the end of September. For those of you who don't know, the third annual MMT conference is coming up at Stony Brook University in Long Island. Still plenty of room for you all to go there. A lot of Airbnbs in the area. We Real Progressives will be there. We are very, very much trying to get our 501c3 and C4 submitted in advance of that, and we are looking for help with fundraising. We're looking at help with anything else you guys can do. If you do video editing, if you can do writing. Folks, we're looking on growing a movement because we are the ones that are trying desperately to advance spending on the public purpose. So please, by all means, if you can join us, we need your help. We'd love to see you at the conference. And with that, Rocco, thank you once again, sir. We're out of here.
Hey, get involved, guys. We are the revolution.
Amen, brother. All right, folks. Bye-bye.